and welcome. It's Debbie DeGroat, CEO and co-founder of Forward Coaching. So we have a really fun topic today. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about geographic farming. Now that we're starting to see inventory beginning to increase across the country, and also we're preparing for potentially a surge ahead. We don't know when, but we know it'll come because there's a lot of pent-up demand. People who have been sitting on the fence for the last couple of years, waiting for rates to drop, now potentially realizing we're not going to see 3 and 4% again. And if they want to make their move, maybe this will be the year. So we're going to see some more turnover in some of these neighborhoods. So many of you have been sending me questions about geographic farming. So we're just going to have no slides today. We're just going to chat together. So, and Daniel, I see you say you don't have any sound. Could everyone else type in the chat box? Let me know that you can hear me, because I think all things are working fine. Michael says he can hear. So Daniel, maybe you want to sign out and sign back in. So if you guys want to type any question that you have about geographic farming in the chat box, if I don't cover it, I will go back and I will circle back to that question, and we'll make sure we get that answered for you. So just as we start off here, I just want to be crystal clear that I'm not here today to sell you on having a geographic farm. I think instead, if you think about it like exploring, is this an opportunity for me? Because it is a commitment, to really take on a geographic area and to become that household name, if you will, that agent of choice. It's an investment of time and money, and it's an investment that needs to be very, very consistent. Otherwise, you may end up wasting your time and wasting your money. So certainly not for everyone. Now, there's also lots of other types of farming. So for an example, you could say, well, you know what? I'm going to either go to my title company, or I know some of you in your MLS have access to Remine, which allows you to filter and search certain types of homeowners like absentee owners. I used to love to work absentee out of state because I felt like they don't know as much about what's going on in the local market. And they were pretty excited to talk to me and get the updates. So you could, for an example, farm investors, you could farm absentee owners, you could farm homeowners that have owned their homes over 25 years. But today, we're just going to talk about the good old-fashioned geographic farming. And someone asked me the other day, do people still do this? Absolutely. In fact, right here in Newport Beach, just a stone throw away from our office, I consider him one of the top geographic farmers that I've ever met. Casey Lesher, he farms the Corona Del Mar area. Casey really runs a pretty perfect model of how he farms, and I'll share that with you. What's interesting is it's very much like the model of another great client for many, many years, Sean Stanfield, who has farmed the Huntington Beach area for many years. So across the country, you'll see great examples, and I'll break it down for you exactly what they do. And while everyone has maybe a slightly different twist on their plan, pretty much they're following the same playbook, okay? So let's start off with, though, how do you choose your farm? You might live in an area where there is just some really beautiful neighborhood. It's gorgeous. It's established. Everybody loves it. But the problem is people seldom move. Maybe they pass the houses down generation to generation, or they just, once they get into that neighborhood, they just stay. So while it would be fabulous to have a great listing in there, there's not going to be very many opportunity because the turnover is low. So what I would suggest is the first thing you do is you consider 3 or 4 areas as your options. Then you take those 3 or 4 areas and you do a deep dive into the turnover in the last maybe 2, 3, even 4 years. And the reason I say that, we all know that the last 2 years are not normal, right? Inventory in 24 and 25 was 40 to 50% less than inventory in a normal market. So I wouldn't judge it too harshly on the last 2 years, but do some deep research. Is that typically an area that has had some pretty good turn? Do you see and expect more turn in the future, right? Because we want to give you the best ROI for your time and money invested. Now, people also ask me, should I farm my own neighborhood, my own community? You know what? That's totally up to you. In Casey's case, he does not. He lives maybe 20 minutes away. He very strategically chose that Corona Del Mar area. It's really expensive. He doesn't want to spend that much money to live there. And he likes to go home at the end of the day and be a little more incognito, right? Because if you take Sean Stanfield as an example, who has farmed Huntington Beach for 25 years, Sean literally cannot go anywhere in Huntington Beach without being recognized and approached by a customer or follower, which is cool, but also kind of a lot, right? So you have to decide. Sometimes the best way to make that decision is how active are you in your neighborhood? You know, I always had a geographic farm when I sold real estate full-time. My husband still does. And I never farmed our neighborhood, quite honestly, guys, because I was never home. I wasn't involved in the neighborhood. I didn't have kids at that time. I would leave early in the morning. I would come home late at night. There really wouldn't have been any benefit other than just convenient. And it wasn't the area that made the most sense for my farming game plan. So I chose a different area. Okay, so you decide your neighborhood or another. But if your neighborhood has very, very low turnover, be careful, might not be a great ROI for you. Now, people also ask me, how big should the area be? Well, 2 things determine that: your budget and your bandwidth. So I started, as many do, with a farm of about 500 because that allowed me to invest enough to be top of mind so that frequency was there. And I was a door knocker. I door knocked that farm every single month. That felt manageable, right? I basically took 500 doors. I divided it by 20 days in the month because I did not door knock on the weekends. I was busy with open house, that type of thing. And it was a pretty manageable schedule to go out and knock those doors. Once I got some traction, started making some money, becoming dominant in that area, then I expanded to an adjacent 500 homes. Once I became dominant in that area, I expanded to an adjacent additional 500 homes, and then I kind of capped it at that, about 1,500. Sometimes you'll see agents say, well, I farm 10,000 houses. That's tough to do because if you don't have a massive budget, how are you going to saturate? Now, another one of our clients who is now retired, actually very successful guy and retired at a pretty young age and has moved to Portugal. Our client Boris in Toronto, Boris did have 10,000 homes that he farmed. But guys, here's how he did it. He started with 1,000. He direct mailed to them market information, data, just listed, just sold, twice a month. Then he added another 1,000 twice a month. Then he added another 1,000. So over time, as his success and budget grew, he grew that to 10,000 doors. He marketed to them twice a month by direct mail. Boris was not a guy to door knock, not a guy to hold community events. And therefore, he only had 10% market share. Okay, but he was okay with that because he would earn $2 million. He had higher end homes there. His cost to market was $200,000. And to him, that return was perfectly fine. Okay. And people will ask me, if I really, really get in and I work that farm intensely, what could my market share be? Well, years ago, believe it or not, I actually had 80% market share in my farm. But you know what? Different times, right? That was a different time. Now there's too much online information. They're out shopping. They're not as loyal. You have more competition in your areas. The competition may be a little bit more marketing driven, so it kind of dilutes a little bit of your messaging. You know, if you could capture 30% market share, you would be doing really, really well, right? So that would be a great goal, okay? So let's take a look over at the chat box just for a second here. Laura has a great question. How do you evaluate what is good turnover? And in fact, guys, give me a second. I'm going to grab my calculator because I cannot do math in my head, especially as I'm talking to all of you. So let's take for an example, Laura, if I found an area of 1,000 homes and I discovered that kind of an average turnover in that area was about 4%. Now, if you had to target a range, of course, more is better, but it's always been said in a geographic farm, if you could get somewhere in that 4 to 5% turnover per year, then it's pretty decent, right? So if I said, well, 4% means 40 homes sold last year. Now, if I were able to capture 30% of those sales, that would be 12 sales that I captured. Now, let's pretend some of you have a much, much, much higher sales price like I do here. Some of you may be a little bit lower, but let's just use the number 500,000. No, let's drop it down. We're going to go lower. We're going to go 350,000. So if we said, well, if it's 350,000 per deal, that would give me 14 million in volume, right? Now let's pretend that you work for a listing commission, which is up to you. I'm not dictating. You know all the laws and rules around that, but I'm just going to use a number. Let's just take 2.5%. That would be about $350,000 in gross revenue. So you can see why people do it, right? It could be very, very profitable. Now, of course, what we have to subtract is our cost of marketing. So you'd want to have a great printer, maybe even your company helps you with some of this, but you've got your cost of your postcard, your printing, your design, your printing, and then your mailing. Now, some of you know about something that's pretty cool that can help you reduce the cost. It's called EDDM, Every Door Direct Mail. Now, that is through your post office, and it's based on the carrier route. What is the carrier route? Well, you know how you go home in the day and you see the mail person in your neighborhood dropping off the mail. Well, they are your mail carrier and you are in their route. So if you check with the post office, you can actually see a map. So you could choose your geographic farm to actually land inside of a carrier route. So you might have a little overlap into a different area, but you want to get as much in that carrier route as you can because that is the most affordable way to mail. Now, sometimes you'll have a printer who will have on-site what they call a mail house. And what that means is you give them your data, your list, they will print everything, they will apply that carrier route, they will mail that out for you, and you don't even touch a thing, which is great, right? And usually they only charge a couple of cents or so per piece for that processing. Here's where you want to be careful though. Make sure that you have a really reputable printer, really reputable mail house attached to that, because there is sometimes a little bit of scam that happens when they take your money, but they don't mail all the pieces, right? Which would be devastating because you paid for the printing. So you want to, it's called seeding the list. Put some people you know on that list, put yourself on that list. Like you want to know, when is that postcard actually arriving? Okay, so get your cost down as much as possible. Beautiful postcards are great, but frequency is equally as important, if not more important, than the quality of that postcard. Okay. Now, I also want to share something with you that as we're talking about budgeting, make it count. There is nothing wrong or harmful with sending out a postcard that has a recipe, or sending out a postcard that says Happy Easter, or sending out a postcard that says time to change your clocks. It's not harmful, but you know what, guys? It's not helpful. They don't need that from you. It does not set you up as the wise advisor in that community. And it's kind of a waste, if you think of it, of your marketing budget. So make that budget count. So what do they want from you? Well, it could be invitation to a sneak preview of an open house, a new listing. It could be an invitation to a community event, which is fun and gives you a great way to connect. It could be market data. For example, it could be a first quarter recap. It could be a list of recent sales, a just listed, a just sold, an I have a buyer postcard. It could be offering an annual real estate checkup, a consult to determine the value of their home. So you think about some themes for your marketing. You have, personally, guys, I always felt like I needed to get 2 postcards a month out in that farm. But if only budget permits 1, then you may want to consider part B, which is how am I going to engage with them personally? So many of you have access to phone numbers through various types of systems. We want to make sure that wherever you're accessing your phone numbers, that the phone numbers have been scrubbed, and we know that you are not calling people who are not on the do not call list, right? So you want good, clean numbers that you can do permission-based marketing, which then you could call behind the arrival of your postcard. Now, there's no rules against door knocking unless you happen to be in a gated community, a homeowners association where it's not permitted, right? So we have to be mindful of that. But for the most part, many of the neighborhoods you might choose to farm, perfectly fine to go out and door knock or door drop. So if your budget is low, then you might skip the mail and physically get out into that community and knock on those doors and meet those homeowners face to face. So you can knock every door. You can drop and talk to people you see out in their yard or in their garage. Personally, for me, I knocked every single door in my Geographic farm, and I actually did it initially twice a month. So I would knock the doors the first half of the month in the morning. I would knock the doors the second half of the month in the afternoon. My theory was I might catch different people at home, if that makes sense, right? Now, and David, to your point, when you look at those numbers of the math that we were just running, remember, we were talking about ideal goal would be to hit 30% capture rate, but that's not going to happen right away. And just like Boris, in his highly competitive farm, Boris not being willing to door knock, the max he could achieve was 10%. So to David's point, you need to figure out the turnover rate, do the math on what you think could be a reasonable percentage of market dominance for you, and then you multiply that by your average sales price and your average commission. And that's going to give you a target, right? What am I shooting for? Now, one thought is thinking of sales price. If we had a neighborhood, and we use the example of 350, which I get it very low for some of you, but if we go back to that example, if this neighborhood is 350,000, and this neighborhood really close by is 450,000, and they both have an equal amount of turnover, why don't I go over there, right? Because if you think about it, if that transaction is going to net me a higher volume, my postcard, my mailing, my effort is the same. So I'll get a higher rate of return. So if you can bump your price point just a little bit, it's going to give you, as they might say, a little more bang for your buck, right? But we still want to go into those neighborhoods that have good turnover and also that you feel comfortable working. When I first started my geographic farming, I was really young in the business. My broker tried to guide me to a higher end area to farm. I couldn't do it. I felt intimidated. I didn't grow up in that kind of area. I thought those people, they would be rich and I wouldn't be rich. And I couldn't do it. He was right. I probably should have done it. But guess what? I think if I had chosen a farm that intimidated me, I might not have worked it as diligently as I did when I chose that area that was more comfortable. So find where you're comfortable and then say inside of that, can I bump the price just a little bit? Okay. So then now, what do we offer on the first mailer? I see Heidi's question. You know what the really dumb thing I did when I first started farming? Now that I look back on it, I did this announcement that I was now going to be working their area and I was now going to be becoming the area specialist. Well, they didn't care, right? That didn't matter to them at all. And also, what it really announced is, I don't work in this area, and now I'm beginning. So instead, you just step right in there as if you have been there forever. Now, the way I got my foot into my farm, which might be a good idea for you guys, I went back and I ran the old expired, canceled in that area for about 2 years. And when I looked at those, I could see who did not actually ever sell. They were still in their home. And then I made a special point of knocking on their door until I actually spoke to that person. And the first two listings I got were old expired listings. So they were ready to put their home back on the market. I got at the door, I talked to them about it, I got those listings. And then, of course, I started marketing the just listed. Then I marketed the just sold. I invited the neighbors to open house. I got the next listing, and it just kind of rolled from there, right? So Laura's asking, what percentage would not be worth considering? 1 or 2%? But here's the tricky thing, Laura. Again, our last 2 years were not normal. So you may have to dig a little deeper and see what was happening before that. What historically has been the turn in that farm. And also, some of it is just knowing that neighborhood. For an example, if it's brand new construction, well, you're not going to have a lot of turnover in the first 2 years, right? But sometimes, right about that 8-year mark, you start to see more turn. A farm that has had massive turnover sometimes quiets down for a number of years. So you really got to just dig in, study it, preview it. And guys, you know what? I recommend that if you're planning to be a door knocker, or if you're planning to make those phone calls into that farm, then what I would suggest that you do is do some of that before you spend the money, okay? Because each farm has its own personality. And you might get into that area and you might discover, I don't love it. I don't love working here. Well, good news is maybe you picked up a lead or two, but now you can just go move over to maybe your second option and run that test as well. So I know we only have about 3 more minutes today. Today's webinar is just a little bit shorter, but I wanted to leave you with another thought. Well, actually 2. If you did the math, let's say even at 10% market share, and so we realize, well, okay, I'm only going to get, a handful of listings. There's always other opportunity, though. Some of you might be willing to double in that listing if the right buyer came along. Some of you don't have that as your practice. I understand. Some of your sellers may then be a buyer that you can sell a home to. Those open houses will allow you to invite neighbors in to get another listing. Those open houses will allow you to get buyers that you can sell something else to. And as they get to know you in that community, they will often refer you to friends and family outside of that area. So there's more ways to monetize your investment than only the listings that you take in that neighborhood if you do it right. Okay? So then last thing, what about the competition? You guys are strong. You're tough. You could go into any market and work hard enough and take it over if you really wanted to. But why not make it a little easier on yourself? If you take your just MLS, your data, the sold properties, the listed properties in that area, you will know if there is a dominant person because you will see their name on those listings over and over and over again. But if you study an area and you're like, it's all kinds of random real estate agents, then you're like, hey, I've got an easier shot at getting in there because nobody controls that market. So it's pretty easy. You just look at what's been sold and by who, what's currently listed and by who, and pretty quickly you're going to know if there's a dominant farmer already established, then you have to decide, do I want to take them on? Do I think I can do that? Or do I want to go across the street and pick that area with no dominant farmer? Okay. So Douglas, real quick, last question here. How do you research turnover? If you are in an area like we are here in California, where you have title companies that have a lot of awesome tools, pretty easy. You just go to your title rep and you say, okay, I need your help. I need a farm package. I'm looking at this area. They know what you need. They have all sorts of resources to help you figure out turnover. If you're in a few areas in the country where you do not have that access, then you need to look at your MLS, right? You need to go into the MLS data and you need to do your research. So it's pretty exciting. You know, the nice thing about it, it's kind of like a geographic sphere of influence, because my husband now, when he door knocks in his farm after 30 years, they meet him at the door, they give him bags of lemons, they give him cookies, they wave him down on the street. The more you do it and the more consistent you are, the easier it becomes, because they're not strangers, right? All right, guys. So, hey, I think I got all the good questions answered. Hope it gave you a few things to think about. You know how to reach me. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help you with anything you might need. And my email is easy. It's Debbie@forwardcoaching.com. All right, guys, I will talk to you soon. Have a great day.